if you want to start off with just kind of the general setting that you work in right now, and then later like how telemed has kind of like impacted that.
Okay. So I work full time as a school based therapist. Um, and that's been my setting for this will be my sixth school year. Um, I also do private practice that has telehealth with students out. So I also have my certification in California. So I also see students there, and then I do nature based group therapy for pediatrics as well. COVID has definitely impacted my teletherapy or my school-based and my nature groups. School-based, I'm providing teletherapy to my students in Michigan. So the nice thing that I had the California experience is because the transition was pretty seamless because I was already doing it. Anyways, my nature groups are on hold. I run them in the summer, and we don't know when we can coexist safely again. So that's on hold for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what sort of terms? Because when we were doing research, we saw like a whole bunch of different terms. Like, what terms do you utilize?
As far as like how I describe it to like parents or something.
Yeah, and as far do you consider it then telemedicine, tele OT? Yeah, how do you describe that too?
So I tend to use telemedicine as like the blanket statement for like any kind of healthcare that's provided over like a synchronous or asynchronous way. And then I use teletherapy for OT and PT as well. You'll also hear telerehabilitation. You can use those in my eyes. You can use those interchangeably. So, but I usually use teletherapy.
But do you feel that parents in general are more comfortable or becoming comfortable with that as well as the kids?
The kids are always resilient. The kids don't care. And, the parents are getting more comfortable with it, especially the ones that are used to having in-person sessions. They at first were kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a lot and it's a lot to coordinate, but I think now that it's been a month now, like they've been more receptive to it. The students that I already had, like in California, they were doing virtual schools, like charter schools anyways, so they were open to doing the virtual, so that for them was not a big deal.
Okay.
But as far as the kids go, the kids are like, oh, cool, I see you on a screen. I can see my face on a screen. Like, they're okay with it.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Do you feel that, so then like the learning curve was a little bit less than obviously for the kids out in California because they are kind of used to it versus the kids here?
Yeah. And the kids here, too, they're so used to having iPads in class anyways. Like, iPads or Chromebooks, they're pretty familiar with the technology. It was more so like getting the connectivity of like a Zoom meeting for the parents and getting them set up was the harder part.
Okay. And do you feel that, like on average, that the kids do have access to internet to have this happen, or is it kind of over LTE, or how does that?
I'd say it's probably 50-50. I serve like Emmett and Charlevoix County, and then my private practice is in Mackinac County, so more rural areas. Internet connectivity is about 50% of my students, and then a lot of them are using hotspot from the phones. But the hard part with that is the beginning of the pay period is fine, and then you get close to your data reach, and then they're like, oh, I gotta get off, we're getting off our data, so.
Yeah. Do you feel that that's sometimes that people kind of use that as an excuse to end the session early, or is it?
It can be.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah.
So is that one of like a barrier? Do you feel?
Yeah, the internet thing is definitely a barrier for sure.
Okay. And do you feel that have you been working with any clients that have like refused to do teletherapy?
Yep.
Okay.
I have some students that because of not even just because of COVID, but because of like in California, I have one student in particular that he is enrolled in virtual school, so their first choice is teletherapy because that's what the school offers. This student in particular has autism, doesn't really have a preferred interest that brings him to the computer to me, and he's hard to redirect. So for those students, we have to try. and we try a certain amount of times depending on the school policy, and then we would recommend to wait for in-person services.
Okay.
So sometimes the parents are just like, why are we doing this? Like, we know it's not going to work, but we have to try anyways, and at least it's something is better than nothing. And in that instance, I usually offer parent education.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And then as far as like how that goes now, as far as like consent to treat, when we were doing our research, that was kind of one of the barriers or considerations. Do you feel that's kind of a barrier in that way, or?
I haven't really found into that personally. As far as like for this, my full-time position in a brick and mortar school, we have been guided to say, like, if a parent is okay with doing like a Zoom or teletherapy service, the consent is indirect, which means like if they're okay with getting online, then we don't have to sign a consent form.
Okay.
When I do my private practice, I have a couple kids that I see on teletherapy now because of COVID. I do offer a consent form, and that's just, covers your bases.
Okay. Yeah, because that was one of the things I know at work here too. Like, I know that CMS has kind of relaxed some of like the encryption stuff. So I didn't know if that impacted you at all. So it sounds like it's nice that they have been allowing us to use different platforms, though, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Has going as far as like COVID and everything up in northern Michigan, does that impact your reimbursement at all?
It hasn't for school-based because it's just Medicaid anyway, and we have to provide the services even if we're reimbursed or not.
Okay.
For myself personally, Medicaid has been reimbursing telemedicine at the same rate as in person because of COVID. That was backdated. I think it was started at the end of March, I believe, and then they backdated it. So it was an issue at first, but now like the executive orders and stuff have helped that.
Okay. Do you have just like a general idea of the percentage, how much less it was before that Telemed would have been?
I want to say it was like 30% less.
Wow. Okay. So in that case, like with your superiors, do they say like try at all means to meet in person like prior to COVID? Or
I didn't really run into that personally. I know like I have colleagues that I worked with in the past that say yes, that they wanted them to meet in person. My superiors were very cautious. They said, just be safe. So.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
But I do know from a past job that I have people that I still talk to that work there, and they are, have the PPE on and they're seeing in person if possible.
Okay. And then kind of switching gears a little bit, do you feel that with Telemed in general that you have less collaboration with other local therapists?
I think it's probably common. You have to like really put an effort into reaching out to those people. And hopefully they answer you back, which I don't think is nearly as much of a problem as it would be otherwise, because like once you get the reach out, usually you reply. But I think it's a more conscious effort to collaborate than it would be if you were in a school or if you were in a hospital.
Okay.
Because everyone's already there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And then as far as outcomes go, do you feel that your outcomes are similar to your in-person sessions, better, worse? Or
I think for those students that it fits for, so like, your fine motor students, your students who have sensor regulation problems but are treatable via a teletherapy model, like I would, and what I'm alluding to is like the student I talked to, like I can't get him to come to the screen, things like that. I find either progress is comparable to in person, or for like even my fine motor students, sometimes it's better because the parents usually there with them, so they can carry it over when you're not in session, and because they're getting that piece from you because they're sitting right there.
Okay, so it, in a way, it is almost more engaging for the parents themselves
Yeah.
too. So that's a very interesting piece. I didn't consider that. So
Yeah, like when I worked in pediatric outpatients, the student or the child would get dropped off to you, and parent would go do some other errand, or they would wait in the waiting room, and you don't have that piece of like a model. Whereas when they're on teletherapy, they have to sit there, otherwise there could be a problem with the tech, or there could be a problem with attention. Like, they're there and they're learning from you too.
Definitely, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Let's see here. Jamie, did you have some questions too down there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have just a couple. I think we covered a lot of them. Since telehealth is an emerging practice, it seems like there's a lot of different companies trying to capitalize on the development of it. How can we ensure that we're actually applying for a legitimate telehealth or telemedicine company when we actually go to apply for a job?
So I have personal experience with this. When I started looking into doing teletherapy, I did apply with 3 different companies. The one that I did end up signing a contract through, and you're just like a subcontractor, so you're still your own practice, but that's how you get referrals. The one that I went with, they answered all my questions very transparently. I was able to negotiate with them, whereas if the ones I felt a little more shady about, they were like, no, this is what it is, and you're cool if you don't want to work with us. There was some callback stuff that was weird, you would call them and you'd hear a week later. There was just some gut, you had a gut feeling of whether or not it was a good spot to work with, you know what I'm saying? I say for that, for me, it was very much a gut feeling of who I trusted when I talked to, because they were collaborating with me and talking me through the process. And I did do my homework as far as that goes. So you just want to go with your gut, I guess, is the answer for that one.
Yeah. And then some of the research that I was looking at, they were kind of anti-telehealth because maybe in some cases it would be difficult to emphasize the value of OT. I mean, if you're just meeting through a computer, how do you emphasize the value of OT?
So from a pediatric standpoint, I go back to that piece about the parent education. It's kind of a forced way to get parents to engage with the therapist. There's also parent coaching through telemedicine too, or through the teletherapy too. You don't have to work with the kid directly. You can have a whole parent coaching call. I've done that before as well. I think a big roadblock as far as teletherapy goes for OTs is a lot of times we're either not included or we don't initiate evidence-based practice. We kind of just hang out in the background and wait for everyone else to do it. I'm a very big proponent in let's do some research. Let's try to show people our value. We have value. And the research can be done. It just needs to be done.
Absolutely. Telehealth is a very interesting avenue. A little background for me, I'm a military spouse, so I will be crossing state lines at some point and moving all over the country. So I'm really interested in maybe a telehealth position where the job's a little bit more portable.
Yep.
Like you said, you have students out in California, so it's really interesting to me. Do you have any tips of maybe continuing education courses that you found were really relevant for your telehealth services?
Yeah. I would definitely, I know a lot of my students either are sensory related or both sensory fine motor. So being well equipped from a sensory standpoint, as a new grad, you get the very bare minimum of sensory, but unless you have a field work or you seek out continuing ed for that, you don't know the nitty gritty of how the neurons are working and how the sensory processing is working. So having a good foundation of sensory processing is important. I've also had a lot of continuing ed in ADHD and attention executive functioning, and that's really served me well too.
So then, Stephanie, do you have to carry your own insurance and everything?
I do. I had it from my private practice when you sign a contract to be a subcontractor for a company for teletherapy, they do ask you to do private insurance.
Okay.
It's very reasonable. It's not very expensive.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that was like when we were doing research, that was another thing, is that some therapists said that the added price for like liability insurance was something that was kind of a factor that made them less likely to do it.
Yeah, it's about the same cost as, like, depending on where the state you live in, but it's about the same as like your licensure.
Okay. That's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then do you see telehealth like changing in any ways like in the future to be improved, or do you have any ideas that could improve it?
I do know that there's a new company coming out. Sorry, I'm roasting. I do know there's a new company that's working on doing what's it called? Like 3D with the goggles, like where it would be more like 3D.
Yeah, we actually, Jamie and I and a couple other people are doing virtual reality for for our research group.
That's awesome.
So that's
I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
I don't have the brain for that, but like if somebody will make it, I'll use it. That'd be awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. Definitely. Jamie, do you have any other questions? No, you're good to go? Okay. Thank you so much, Stephanie.